The induction of NWA into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has sparked more discussion whether or not hip-hop artists belong in there. And it sparked that old discussion about certain genres of music, whether or not people like them, whether or not they are music at all. It exposes some of the reasons why people hate some genres or subgenres of music. And that got me thinking, there are a lot of genres out there that have some pretty silly reasons why folks just simply won't touch them. And we're talking simply stating more than just the sound itself, though that can certainly play an important factor. One of the biggest polarizing parts of heavy music is death metal. It's the place where a lot of people will sometimes stop in their heavy metal journey after starting with something such as thrash or the new wave of British heavy metal or some of the modern metal that they hear on the radio. The minute that they hear some death metal that is a bit above and beyond the call of ridiculous, they tend to maybe turn on their heels and run towards some safer ground. So it got me thinking, what are 5 reasons that people truly hate death metal? So here we are. We're here to discover exactly that. What are 5 reasons that people hate the music that seems obsessed with serial killers and growls with the best of them? Where bands such as Death and Morbid Angel, Cannibal Corpse, Obituary paved the way, along with many others, for the plethora of death metal that exists today in many different forms. Well, let's take a look. Here are 5 reasons that people hate death metal. And we start, of course, with number 5. Number 5 is that it's anti-woman. Now, this is one that has been sort of peaking and valleying in relevance. Whenever death metal first came out, this really wasn't that huge of a complaint. It was something that was mentioned in some minor tones and then has sort of died off, but has, of course, in recent memory, gained a little bit of traction once again, considering the feminist movement and all of the other things that have surrounded it have started to resurface in our society in various forms. Death metal is being seen as anti-woman and not worth consumption based around the simple idea that it seems that all of the victims that are being talked about in some of the songs that maybe involve a serial killer or maybe involve something else is all an anti-woman idea. It's always a woman that's getting strangled, beaten, raped, whatever it may be. In fact, if you take a look just at the song titles, it seems as though this is the case. You don't necessarily see as much about males would be the complaint, but of course, you will see that there's a little bit of an accuracy or at least an equality that is somewhat unspoken in death metal, with songs such as Chemical Castration really coming to mind. Death metal overall is a genre that sometimes will take this route. It's seen very often as a horror movie in music form, and whenever you think about the victimology of horror movies, whenever you think of the victimology, it's usually somewhat equal but leans a little bit more toward the female gender. That being said, this could also be seen as a somewhat religious debate, but either way, it's one that seems kind of silly. And it only seems silly based around the fantasy nature or just the ridiculous nature of many of these songs. This is meant to be, as I said, a horror movie in music form. It's not meant to actually reflect how most of these artists, and I have to say most, considering I'm sure fewer sickos, how most of these artists actually feel about the female gender. After all, death metal has a lot of female fans, and they love this stuff. So, yeah, there's a little bit of a discrepancy there. It's kind of weird. Number 4 is that it's simplistic, and I don't get this one whatsoever. If I listen to death metal, the first thing I'm not thinking about is that it's really simplistic. In fact, death metal is sort of a technical style of thrash music that has evolved to technical wizardry over the years. However, there's a lot of people out there that still feel that death metal is very one-dimensional. It's perhaps more of the case that they do a very similar idea over and over again. It's a sound that seems very repetitive as opposed to being altogether simplistic. There is a bit of a difference, but simplistic is the word that I see used more often than not. That blows my absolute mind. They say that death metal is a form of music that simply has one goal in mind, and it's to play as fast, as heavy as possible, and whenever it comes to, the cleanliness of something or something being mindlessly amazing, technically proficient, extremely brilliant is really the secondary point, and that's kind of the argument that I would use against these people. It is meant to be dirty, it's meant to be grimy, it's meant to be ugly. That's one of the principal reasons why death metal is such a popular genre to a lot of individuals within the heavy metal subtext, because it has that rugged exterior to it, it has that rough notion to it, and it's one that is able to captivate a lot of individuals. Think about what some of these gentlemen and ladies do whenever they write their music and perform it. It's feats that most normal individuals without proper training or honing a skill can't accomplish. That includes the vocals as well. I know for one, I am no master of guttural vocals, and so whenever I see and hear somebody who does it exceptionally well, I am a bit impressed. However, whenever it comes to the simplistic nature, this seems like a really silly argument that way too many people use, and probably do so without really understanding what exactly is going on. It brings us to number 3, which is the sound itself. Kind of coupling up with number 4, the sound itself is one that turns a lot of folks off, considering it does have that ugliness, that ruggedness. There's nothing really clean and fancy and nice about this. It's one that is meant to be more of an oral assault on the listener, and really my argument to those folks would be you really didn't listen to very much of the Death discography, have you? Either that or later on in the death metal, history that we've seen in more recent times, there's technical wizardry that exists there. Really, death metal has become sort of this ambiguous term that has been able to be coupled with other styles of music, with other styles of metal, to create something that's absolutely different than perhaps what your immediate expectation is. Consider the idea of progressive death metal. I will go back to one of my favorite bands of all time, in Opeth, who has very deep guttural vocals that is surrounded by some music that is at times hypnotic, at times a bit repetitive, but at times magical and beautiful. And the mix between the guttural vocals and Michael Ackerfeet's clean vocals truly is what makes the experience one of a kind, and actually makes it a lot more pleasurable on the ear with that duality sense. It almost brings a certain, natural sense of balance to the music, as opposed to it being an oral assault at all times, or in the case of a lot of pop music, something that sounds overly sugar-coated, something that doesn't exactly have a lot of heart behind it, or so it would sound. Different strokes for different folks really on this one, but the sound is one that has expanded to the point where just about anybody that's out there, aside from perhaps, diehard pop music fans, people that can't get past Katy Perry, are going to find something within death metal and one of its subsidiaries that they are going to potentially enjoy quite a bit. Number 2, I can't understand them. We've seen the memes, we've seen everything about this. I can't understand it, but it must have a certain message behind it. There's got to be something behind this. The funny thing is a lot of the people that say that they can't understand the lyrics are the ones that say that it's anti-woman, that it's simplistic, that, all of these lyrics are very one-dimensional, or that it's pure evil, that it is the music of Satan. Since they can't understand something, it is the music of Satan. Then they will go out and listen to a Twista album where they claim that they can listen and understand each and every single lyric that he said, even though he's one of the fastest rappers alive. It's kind of a weird case. Now, I understand not everything is going to sound like Christian rock, where it's going to be, I love what Jesus has done for me. And I'm not saying that to be anti-Christian or anything like that. The same thing can be exhibited even in rock music. I love what my baby's done for me. You could even be country in that same respect. I love what my baby's done for me. I love what my baby's done for me. You can apply that notion to just about anything, but people just seem to don't think that that's what they're saying. If they're saying, I love what my baby's done for me, it's kind of a weird argument. But it's one that's probably the most popular, with the lone exception of number 1, and that's the fact that it's evil. Now, yeah, there's a lot of death metal out there that is comprised of some pretty evil shit. Deicide is not going by the notion of horror movie in music form. Dark Funeral is not doing that either. These are some keynote examples of where these people are a little bit right. But to say that all of death metal is evil is a bit of a stretch. It's one of those blanket statements that all it really does is make a lot of people look stupid. It makes a lot of people look very, very silly. Once again, we go back to the Death discography with this one, considering Chuck Schuldiner is a man that certainly painted a lot of great philosophical notions throughout his lyricism, mused a lot about life, mused a lot about the self, and that's something that you see even to this day. Even in some of the different hybrids that you get of death metal today, you're going to hear some pretty fucked up stuff, no doubt. There's going to be some lyrics that are not exactly going to be, PC. There's bands such as Disavowed that are going to just speak about anything. Bands such as Carcass basically have a medical dictionary at their disposal. Some might say they're not death metal, but people will say that they're death metal. Hell, people are saying that Falling in Reverse are death metal. Come on, people! Understand that this really is a blanket term, and no blanket term should be just cited as one specific thing. And that's exactly the case here. If you like death metal, consider Falling in Reverse death metal, but yet you call all death metal evil, then something's wrong here. There is a very, very big problem here if you consider one to be acceptable and the other not to be. Now, there is a matter of taste that is involved. I do understand that. However, if you are going to really claim one to be one and the other to be two, then you're listening to two different styles of music, or at least two different varieties of the same style. In reality, death metal is a subgenre that has become subgenred itself to death in the heavy metal landscape and really just in the musical landscape. This isn't even something that's restrictive just to the heavy metal tone. It's instead one that is now being applied and used sort of as a term for anything that has a deep, heavy exterior to it that perhaps doesn't involve clean singing. And that's a bit of a misnomer, considering death metal is sort of like what Ice Cube was saying about hip-hop, and saying about how hip-hop does have rock and roll exterior to it. Death metal is an attitude. Death metal is a way in which you write your music. It's also a way in which you perform, but it's also an attitude in a way in which you carry yourself. So there's a big discrepancy here about the whole evil idea. This is traditionally ones that, or an argument that is forged by those who don't understand it or already have a stick up their ass, and really it's a name that starts with C or J or G. CGJ, UOMG right there, Christ God Jesus. But it's still something that is a bit unfair, considering death metal will speak on a variety of topics. Now, is death metal going to go out there and write a song about baseball? You know, Casey at the Bat, for example. Probably not. But if somebody does opt to cover Casey at the Bat from a death metal band, it will probably be hilarious. If you don't believe me, check out Debauchery's covers of songs from bands such as the Beatles. First of all, the covers are fantastically done. And second of all, if you don't leave with a smile on your face, then you might not be mortal. You might not be human. You might just be a jackass. Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. 5 reasons that people think that death metal is the pits. Now, of course, many of you on this channel, many of you subscribers, and those of you coming in, we all know that death metal has a lot more to offer than just what the folks believe that death metal is all about. So in the comments below, if there's anything that I missed, any reasons that I missed, please list them there, and list your favorite death metal band. I want to know who you find to be your death metal treasure. The band that rips your face off and feeds it to you the best. I'm Cover Killer Nation, and I'll talk to each and every one of you guys later. Take care.